Corporation being a legal person is very important to understand. Why do we incorporate? A lot of reasons. We incorporate usually to do one thing, buffer tax. What most people do is talk about incorporating to protect assets, but there's a problem. Corporation that is active cannot protect its assets, and on top of that, you don't have the assets you want in the first place. So the corporation cannot do asset protection because it carries liability. Employees, suppliers, and creditors. So what we do is we incorporate to receive money, buffer tax. The rule is very simple. A corporation, all right, is taxable when it's profitable, which is very important to understand. So we can buffer tax, we can expense the money, and we can grow a business, which is important. If we were DBA doing business as ourselves, we would carry the liability, steal the money from the family, the credit, kind of screw it up, and in some cases end up doing tax evasion versus tax planning or tax balancing. The reason we do divisions is very simple. We want to have multiple functions. Corporation owning a printing company, a plumbing company, construction company, multiple functions is very important to us. The next thing is, why do we do divisions? To buy at wholesale price. Divisions allow us what's called the line of defense. If we were to look at Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Pepsi, they're owned by a corporation, and the corporation manages those franchises to franchisees. As you go through that process, like Bank of America, every branch has a number to it because every branch is a corporation within itself. So the entities would be the entities called divisions. Eventually, within 1 or 2 years, hopefully they'll become called subsidiaries. A subsidiary is basically a corporation owned by a corporation. The reason we do the divisions, again, they're cheap. We can roll the dice. We can see what works. If it doesn't work, great. At least we tried. But it doesn't bring the pain home. And the goal is we have to try. As we go through the corporation, keep in mind one thing. This corporation that is active always issues stock. Always issues stock. From there, how does it protect its own asset if it failed? It cannot. So therefore, it has to have what's called an equity corporation. An equity corporation protects the assets of a person or the founders, and then from the assets of the other corporation. That equity corporation can do what's called asset protection. A lot of people talk about asset protection, again, in the beginning, but the difference is, do you really have the assets to protect? Are you trying to buffer the income, keep the money, buy the assets, and then learn to protect them as we grow? As your corporation grows, it'll change. Its philosophy, its techniques, its strategy must change. It will get into what's called tax balancing. It's very important to make sure we change. So when we look at tax ID, officers list, and divisions, it's very important to make sure we understand the process of this as we do this. The first thing we look at is an SS4 form. The SS4 form is something that you get set up for the corporation. It's kind of like a Social Security number. Debt follows Social Security number, for instance, as a person. Debt might follow or will follow the tax ID for the corporation. As we look at an SS4 form, and step 1 is the legal person, the legal entity. That is the corporation's name. As you put the corporation's name there, then you figure out where do you want the tax ID mailed to. They don't want to send it to your registered agent. They want to send it to the person that's signing for this. As you do the tax ID is on the behalf of the corporation. In most cases, it's for employee benefit. It's for the corporation to open a bank account, obtain corporate credit, and many things as we go through that process. So your own address could be there. The address should be probably home-based business, a mailbox, etc., something like this in general to receive it. I wouldn't use P.O. Box. You also cannot use pencil. You must use pen. So make it very legible. Line 7 should be a concern because it is your name and your Social Security number. Let's remember something. Your name and Social Security number doesn't mean that you're giving up who owns the corporation. It says who's responsible to make sure the IRS gets their money. The IRS, if you have employees, payroll taxes are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So therefore, you got to make sure you set up ADP, paycheck to bank, somebody else to do payroll to buffer all that. Because if you do payroll, you'll probably steal from Peter to pay Paul, and you might even take their money. The IRS can chase you for 10 plus years. Also, they can put you in jail or go after you personally as well. The next thing is, states can chase you up to 30 plus years, some states. So when we do this, this is a federal tax ID. If you're in a state like California, they have what's called a state number. The state number is issued for payroll taxes also, but it's not used for anything else. Nobody uses it for credit purposes. Banks don't even care. So the difference is it's based on the state if they have a state tax. So remember on line 7 is your name and your Social Security number. That name and Social Security number is responsible for the person or persons who are the bookkeeper. It does not prove ownership. So let's not think about ownership. It just says, hey, Mike Smith, you've ordered a tax ID on the behalf of a corporation. That corporation, if it hires employees, Mike Smith, you're responsible to make sure those payroll taxes are paid. If they're not paid, they will chase line 7. So it's like a bookkeeping function. It's a maintenance function is what it really is. So name and Social Security number there. The next thing is the type of entity. If you are a nonprofit organization, you would put nonprofit. If you're a corporation for profit, like a C corporation, then what you will do is a corporation, and then where it says to specify, you would put C Corp. So the C Corp, remember C stands for closed corporation, is privately held, privately owned. As you go through that process, you're going to put the C Corp there. Next thing is number 8A and AB, right? Corporation, the name and the state. It also says the word foreign. Let's remember many things that happen. A foreign could be out of state or out of country. When you register a corporation from out of country or, for instance, out of state to another state, it's called a foreign corporation. And all states allow foreign country or foreign state to be registered, and that's not a problem as you go through that process. If you were to pick a California, so if it was a California, you would put the state of California. If you picked a Nevada court for privacy, then you would basically put Nevada there. If it was foreign country, you would put that as well. Let's keep in mind a lot of people get you confused. Some people will say pick a Nevada court. Why would we pick Nevada court? Some people advertise you pick Nevada because of taxes. Well, the problem with that, I have a problem with that. Because even in Nevada, you file what's called an 1120, a federal tax return. The federal tax return is very simple. You would file that federal tax return in any state you do business in. It's an 1120. It's due March 15th, all right, the previous year, after you've done the year and it's completed from a fiscal or a calendar year. If you were to make up to $50,000 of profit, your tax rate could be up to 15%, if not more. If you make $100,000, 36% or more or less. Based on that, there's still tax even for a Nevada or Wyoming corporation. The next thing is if you pick a Nevada corp and do business in another state, you must qualify that corporation. When you qualify that state, for instance, like California, California has their $100 fee to qualify, foreign corp, and on top of that, you, if you made money, would pay state tax. And basically rates anywhere from 8 to 10% based on what the current status is. So from there, you would still pay tax, state and federal. So if someone tells you Nevada because of no tax, doesn't make sense. If someone tells you Nevada Corporation for asset protection, remember, you don't have the assets to protect. So what are they talking about? We got to have a corporation go get the assets, buffer the money, buffer the tax, and then get the assets, and then have another corporation protect the assets. Because how can a corporation that's active, again, with employees, suppliers, and creditors, ever protect its own assets when it's the only thing that can actually file bankruptcy? It cannot protect itself. And that's what's important to us. So remember, as we go through this process, whatever state you pick, no matter what we do, when we're profitable, we will be taxable. But that's why we look at different things we're allowed to do as well. Reasons to apply. Reasons to apply usually are why. Start a new business. That's great. From there in the future, maybe you'll set up a tax ID for a trust or a pension plan. All right, banking purposes. Change type of organization. So based on this, tax IDs for businesses, you might buy and sell or trade. As we do this, reasons why to apply. The next thing we go through that process is the date the business started. If you order a tax ID and you have your charter, you would pick the date the charter was issued. If you order a tax ID today, you would put today's date. Even if the charter has not been done. In other words, your corporation is not filed yet. You gave 1 or 2, 3 names and you're in the process of filing it. You can order the tax ID prior to filing the corporation. You can assume the number 1 name you give is acceptable. The difference is if the corporation comes back with a different name, then it does not match the tax ID, you would create a resolution of correction. In other words, you'd send a letter on stationery to the IRS and say, this name was rejected, this was accepted. That is called a resolution of correction. And as we go through that process, they would update the name, all right, for the tax ID process. So it doesn't cost you the time. And then again, you would put today's date or the charter date. From there, closing month will always be the calendar year, and you want to make sure it's December 31st, year 2000, whatever, as you go through that process. Because at the end of the year, March 15th next year, you again will file state or federal tax based on how you're structured for the previous year. As you go through that process, next thing is, have you ever done the tax ID? Employees, have you have employees now? Based on that, currently, if it's a new business, usually the answer is 000 as we go through that process. Then what we want to do is, number 14, check the box, best describe the principal activity of your business. If it's manufacturing, is it retail, import, export, whatever it might be. In the beginning, if you do what I believe, the corporation is very neutral. In other words, we've named this corporation XYZ Enterprise Inc. Again, it has a division for, all right, maybe printing, jewelry, sporting, construction, whatever it might be. The entities are important, but the corporation is neutral. If the corporation owns companies like most companies do, from small, medium, or large, what you would do is probably say the word service, all right, or management company. Because in essence, the corporation gets credit and it manages companies with multiple activities. Keep in mind, again, divisions are set up to give you wholesale pricing and multiple activities, which are very important, and the line of defense in case something goes wrong. As we do this, it says on basically number 16, and based on some of the forms, it might change the number, but the question is always the same. Has the applicant ever applied before? Well, it's a brand new corporation, so the answer would definitely be no. So the applicant hasn't applied before. From there, you're going to sign it, and you're going to put your title there. Maybe you're the treasurer, the president, the director, the CFO, vice president, whatever you're going to be. Again, you're registering this because you are the bookkeeper and responsible for the payroll taxes. You open the bank and everything else. If you don't pay the payroll taxes, they're not dischargeable in bankruptcy, as any attorney would tell you, or CPA, and they will chase you because you're line 7. So again, ADP, paycheck, the bank. Somebody to do payroll versus you. And you would sign it, you would date it, and then you would submit it. And then that would get the tax ID. The next thing is officers list. The moment you set up a corporation, you should have that first meeting, as we discussed in the prior classes. From there, once you get the charter back, your third page usually is the officers list. An officers list in most states, you will find out they want full name, address, and everything else. Based on privacy, maybe you will pick Nevada, Wyoming, maybe you will not. Remember, an officer's list is public record in all 50 states. Nevada and Wyoming, they don't disclose officers as stockholders, and they don't trade with the IRS. So a lot of people like privacy in today's world. So what do we look at is, based on the structure, our address is going to be there, and what's going to happen is your corporation's name and charter number will be there. You're allowed, if you do pick a Nevada corporation, to put your first initial and your last name. Some states, they want between 2 and 3 officers. Also, Nevada allows P.O. Box, or you can use your registered agent's address. I would always recommend registered agent's address for protection. Remember, again, it's public record. It's on the internet. So people can see Mike Smith. If you put your home address, who is Mike Smith? Where does he live? If they put Mike Smith and a registered agent's address, how many Mike Smiths are there in the world? I would rather be the needle in the haystack than the haystack. If they allow this, we should do what they allow us to do. So your address or a registered agent's address, that will be your choice. From here, you have president, secretary, treasurer, and a director. You have 4 positions to fill. They allow 1 person to be all 4. Keep in mind, most banks want the president and the secretary to be present at the time you open the bank account. So if they're the same person, you'll be present. If they're not the same person, make sure their flexibility of their schedule can be it there. In other words, if somebody was out of state or out of country, I would not let them be president or secretary, maybe treasurer or director. So that way I have no problem in hesitations of opening a bank account. When you open the bank account, try to make sure you have banks that are in multiple states that can help you, because hopefully your business will grow, and it will go into multiple states and multiple locations, as a business would grow through divisions. If we do the California, all right, again, they want your address you use, a physical address you do business. That could be home. That might be your shared office space. That might be your location. So, all right, it's a concern. Full name, everything else. And between 1 and 2 officers, sometimes 3 officers, based on the type of corporation you've set up. So keep in mind, it is public record. The next thing to think about is a division of a corporation. Why do people do DBAs? They don't know about it. What is a DBA? Doing business as. Fictitious business name. In other words, Mike Smith says, hey honey, we're going to start a business and we're going to go into construction. So Mike Smith can file a DBA doing business as XYZ Construction. But the problem is, on most DBA forms, where it says the business is conducted by, it says individual or husband or wife. So that means if Mike Smith is name on there and his husband and wife, both names are there, there's a problem. So if both names are there, if the construction company gets sued, they get to sue Mike Smith and his spouse. So that brings the pain home and the liability is carried by Mike Smith. Instead of doing something like that, what we can consider is where it says business conducted by, it allows a corporation. In other words, corporations can run anywhere from usually about $400 to $2,000 to $3,000. If we wanted multiple corporations, we want spending thousands of dollars before we would know what works. So the main thing is, if we set up a corporation and set up a division, literally anywhere from usually from $30 to $50 per division, we can roll the dice and we can see what works. We can fine tune it. Unfortunately, most businesses fail in the first year. So if we had 4 businesses we tried, 1 failed, we could disconnect, isolate, incorporate, and get rid of. We would save the other pieces. And again, that's the line of defense. It's very important to make sure, because the average entrepreneur has 2 or 3 ideas to try anyway. Most people try to do some real estate, and that's fun too. So as we go through that process, we look at the local newspapers, we file this. We can file this at the county recorder's office and go over to a newspaper and have it published within the 30 days we're supposed to do this. The only problem is it takes 2 or 3 hours to do all that. Local newspapers can send this to you. If it's the first filing, it's new. So first filing is new. If it's renewal, because in some states, all right, DBAs expire. So if it expires like this one here for 5 years, as it states, then every 5 years you would basically refile as you go through that process. If it was with change, what would happen is, for instance, if you had a DBA view, you could do what's called an abandonment, cancel the DBA view, and then refile it to the corporation. When you refile it to the corporation, you're changing something. Maybe you're changing the address, you're changing the name, or you're changing the ownership, which is very good as you go through that process with change. All right, on this form here, number 2, and again, some forms change, they want to know the name of the business. So that would be the division, XYZ Printing, XYZ Construction, XYZ Sporting Good, whatever it is. As you go through that process, a charter number is there. If a corporation is not filed yet, you should never file a DBA, fictitious business name, as a division or entity of a corporation. Corporation must be filed first. Then there, line 3, it says it needs the address. The division's address where you're doing business. If it's a home-based business, use home-based business address. If it is a shared office space, your own location, no problem. From there, what you're looking to do, and basically number 4, is going to ask for who the owner is. As we go through that, full name, a resident. All right, what that would mean is the corporation's parent company's name. So therefore, a corporation can do business as another name. So XYZ Corporation has an entity / division called XYZ Printing Jewelry Construction. If they sue the division, they tend to sue the parent company, but it doesn't sue the person and does not bring the pain home, which is very important to us. It also asks if a corporation, tell us what state. If we picked Nevada or California or Texas, whatever it would be, we would tell them what state we incorporated in as we go through that process. The address for the parent company could be your registered agent's address or your permanent address. It will be a choice that you use, and it will be up to you to use, or again, residence address or permanent address as well. As we do this, it says and say from the business is conducted by individual husband and wife, that's what we're trying to get away from. It's a corporation. So therefore, a corporation doing business as another name, if they sue this, and they would serve your registered agent instead. And what happens is it protects and buffers you. Within 1 or 2 years, as you fine-tune again, I would highly recommend that your divisions become corporations. In other words, if they're in Texas, your divisions in Texas, make it a Texas corporation. It's in Miami, same thing. California, same thing. When it does that, when they become corporations, when you fine-tune them, their stock is owned by the parent company. The parent company manages, services, and controls their assets. And on top of that, what they do is all the profits are passed through the stockholder. So the parent company is the stockholder. If one messes up, you could bankrupt if you had to. And you'd see a local bankruptcy attorney who specializes in corporate bankruptcy. But the parent company would set up the pension plan, the annuities, the profit sharing, the medical, the dental, the 401k, the life insurance policy, because corporations have to ensure their what? Officers, board, or principals, or founders, because they are actually the key to the corporation. As we go through this process, if we pick a corporation in one state and we take it to another state, it will be classified as a foreign corporation again. Every state has policies and procedures. I'll always tell you to check planning and zoning or the state rules. And you go into the state's capital or their website, and it would tell you about qualifications. You can also find certain title companies. Title companies that actually specialize in business title companies. These companies can do searches and tell you and help you process and qualify a corporation. So if we take a corporation, an example, and we went to one state and we picked, let's say, a Nevada corporation, and we wanted to qualify that in another state, Texas, Miami, or even California. When we would qualify, we have to provide the state what's called a certificate of good standings. All states want to know that your corporation's in good standings. All right? In other words, you pay all your fees, you've had no problems, everything else. And then you get the certificate of good standings. You would take the original. And what would happen is you would get a copy of your corporate charter. Your corporate charter, you never display the original because it has the original seal and the signature. So what you would do is take the copy of the corporate charter, the original certificate of good standings, make some copies. Some cities, creditors, or banks might ask for a copy of that. Be prepared for that question. From there, the original would go to the state. And some states charge anywhere from $20 up to, usually like in California, up to $100 to qualify for a foreign corporation. So therefore, we have a copy of our corporate charter. So the copy of the corporate charter, the original certificate of good standings, we pay the state fee of $100. And then if we have another company, like a title company, do this, I've seen them charge anywhere from $50 to $100 to do the paperwork for you, or you can do this yourself by going into their website and contacting the Secretary of State. And then you qualify as a foreign corporation. And a foreign corporation, let's understand, means a corporation filed in one state is allowed to do business in another state. And they would provide you a certificate of good standings and a certificate of qualifications. Planning, zoning, and states. We've always got to play by the rules. If they tell us to get a home-based business permit, we do so. Whatever they tell us to do, we do. No matter what happens, as we go through the process, we always play by the rules and we always do what needs to be done. So as we go through this process, we always check planning and zoning. Because planning and zoning might want a resale license, business license, home-based business permit. What does the state require us to do? What do we have to do to conform within that state? Businesses, based on an internet business, based on a retail business, a manufacturing business. What do we have to do to play by the rules as we go through this process? So hopefully this information has helped you and you go through this process as you go through it for tax ID, as well as division, setup, and officers list. I'm Ray Reynolds, and we'll see you next time.